This is Love You a Brunch, brought to you by ASIC Incorporated, the show for those who'd rather be brunching. I'm Jodi Stapler. When we think of brunch, we often think of Mother's Day, Easter, the day after Thanksgiving, maybe even the day after New Year's. But when did brunch start? Have you ever wondered? Well, today on Love You a Brunch, we're going to talk about when brunch started, some of the early recipes and menus, also speak to a historical interpreter about how brunch may have looked 100 years ago. We'll also meet Kelly Page from 94th Air Squadron Restaurant in Van Nuys, California, one of Open Table's top 100 brunch restaurants in America. And I'll sit down with a few of my friends, Sammy and Jamie, and reminisce about brunches from our past and see how we can start or continue those traditions today. So stay with us on Love You a Brunch. This is Love You a Brunch, brought to you by ASIC Incorporated, the show for those who'd rather be brunching. I'm Jodi Stapler. This is Sammy and Jamie sitting in with me today. We're trying some brunch drinks today. First one we're trying is the Blackberry Bourbon Iced Tea. Pretty good. What do you guys think of it?
Pretty good. Definitely have to stir it to kind of get the mix with the bourbon, but nice color, really, refreshing.
Yeah, it's a good, I like it. I like the blackberry part of it, and you can taste the mint in it. Mm-hmm. It's refreshing.
Yeah, it's much better now that we stirred it.
Yeah.
Now you're supposed to float the bourbon on top, but that was a little too much for lightweights like us. But also I did fill the glasses with ice. But for those of you who are, really like bourbon or into whiskey, don't stir it. Don't add the ice. So we'll put that recipe on the website. But basically it's just mashing blackberries and mint and sugar and then pouring some black tea that you brewed over top of it. But otherwise it's not bad.
Pretty easy and, good for the holidays.
Yeah, and the nice thing is you can make it beforehand. So like the tea was actually in the fridge for a while. You have to make it like about 3 hours ahead of time. So yeah,
it's chilling while you're preparing for
yeah. I sat down and spoke to Kelly Page, the general manager of the 94th Aero Squadron Restaurant in Van Nuys, California, which was voted one of Open Table's top 100 best brunch restaurants in America. If you like a theme restaurant, and especially if you're into American history, you will love to visit 94th Aero Squadron Restaurant. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How fitting today that we're talking on Veterans Day.
That's right. 94th Aero Squadron are right here on the Van Nuys Airport. We have a nice view of all the planes taking off and landing. And kind of an old feeling of military, kind of a World War II theme. We have a lot of memorabilia on the walls. Kind of takes you back in time when you come eat with us.
Yeah, I was looking on the website. The pictures are amazing. There's actually a little French chateau.
That's right, yeah. We have, when you walk in, we have a plane out front. We have a Jeep. Our owner, David Talashe, was a World War II fighter pilot.
Wow.
So he had a lot of collections. He has a lot of airplane collections. So it's kind of a hobby of his. And you can really see it. It's a lot of fun things to look at when you come here.
Actually, reason why we're calling is because the brunch there was voted as one of the top 100 brunch restaurants in America. That's pretty spectacular.
Yes, we were super excited about it.
Yeah. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the brunch and what made people want to vote that one of the top 100?
Sure. We have a lot to choose from. We have made-to-order pastas, made-to-order omelets. We have a carving station. We have a wide variety of different breakfast items, lunch items. We change out different fish and chicken dishes from week to week. A variety of decadent desserts with a chocolate fountain and waffles, blintzes. So just a lot to choose from, and it comes with bottomless champagne, coffee, juice, tea, and on top of that, the atmosphere is just great.
Bottomless champagne, that's awesome. Did you see the new study that just came out? They said that you're supposed to drink 3 glasses of champagne each week to ward off Alzheimer's.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So I'm all for that. So, okay, great. Do you have any special recipes that people really just, that's the thing they go for?
Yeah, we have a taco bar. A lot of people are really, it's the seasoning that our chef uses for the carne asada and the chicken. That's something that the guests really enjoy. Other than that, I think sometimes we have some rotating dishes like our osabuco, which is something that the guests really request and crave. It's one of those craveable dishes.
Can you tell us what that is?
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry for those of us who don't know.
Osabuco is like a very tender meat.
Okay.
And it's served with the bone, and it's a rich, hearty dish. It's kind of unique. You don't really see it very many other. I mean, you don't see it very often, but it's a very tender dish. A lot of flavor.
What kind of meat is that?
Osabuco is veal shanks. It's braised with vegetables, white wine, and broth.
I know you have champagne and things there, as you said, but do you have any other specialty like brunch drinks? We're big on that here on Let's Do Brunch.
Oh, yes. Actually, we do. We have a special brunch cocktail list. And actually, if you come in for the brunch, the cocktails are only $3.50. So it's actually a really good value. Different drinks such as our Bloody Marys, of course. We have wild berry mojitos. We have different cocktails like the cucumber gin cooler, burning mandarin martini. Those are some really fun cocktails.
Yeah, a little bit for everybody.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what kind of atmosphere is it when you come in? Do you have like old music playing? What is it like?
Yeah, we do. We change it from different 50s to like kind of a like a bluesy type rock feel. We try to keep the energy up at the same time, keep the theme going. So a lot of times when people walk in, they're just kind of amazed and they feel like they've been brought back in time, which is kind of fun.
And I can imagine that a lot of families take their grandfathers that were in the military.
Yeah, that's right. We do have a lot of regulars that have been coming here for many, many years, and a lot of pilots. We have a communal table in the bar that's reserved for the pilots, which is really cool.
Oh, cool.
And then we have a lot of the younger people that are kind of discovering us, kind of as a hidden gem, that are, so we have a wide variety of different guests that come in.
Awesome.
I think for those that haven't been here, definitely check us out. We definitely are a hidden gem here. Been here for quite a while. And if you don't make it for brunch, we also have a happy hour and a great lunch and dinner menu as well during the week.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. I enjoyed speaking with you today and feel like I should get on a plane and go out to your restaurant right now. I'm a big history buff, so the whole World War I theme is right up my alley. I will, on our website, put up pictures and links to 94th Aero Squadron restaurant. Nice talking to you today, and happy Veterans Day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks so much. For information on 94th Aero Squadron Restaurant, visit 94thvannuys.com. And for more information on the top 100 best brunch restaurants in America from Open Table, visit opentable.com. Today I'm going to share with you 2 items from my bakery that were always huge hits. One is cinnamon rolls, and these are almost clones, if not better than those ones you get at the mall, and also a peanut butter pie. These are wonderful for when you're having a get-together for the holidays, if you're going to a housewarming, or if you just want to have something special to have at home for your family and friends when they come over. Now, you can make this first one in your bread machine, or you can make it by hand. I'm going to give you directions on using with your bread machine. It makes it a little bit easier. Now, bread machines are different, and they do suggest different orders of putting your items into the bread machine. I'm going to give you the directions in order that I would put the items in my machine. First, I'm going to put in 4½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon salt, ½ cup white sugar, 2½ teaspoons of fast-acting yeast, 1 cup of warm milk, that's, more room temperature, not too hot, and 2 eggs at room temperature. It's always important when you're baking to make sure your items that are usually kept in the refrigerator are at room temperature when you're baking. Put all of those ingredients into your bread machine. Turn it on to the dough setting. Let that mix and rise. Once it is risen in the bread machine, I prefer to pull it out of the bread machine, put it in a greased ceramic or porcelain or glass bowl. I also like to cover the top with a little bit of oil as well. And then I usually put a towel or some cheesecloth or something over top of it just to keep it safe from anything getting on it. But I let it rise about double the size. Once it is risen, you're going to roll this out, making sure that you're putting flour on your surface so that the dough doesn't stick. You're going to roll that to about 16 by 21 inches, so like the size of a cookie sheet. On top of that, you're going to put 1/3 cup of butter, and I suggest using salted butter. I always use salted butter for all of my baking needs because it adds a little bit of a saltiness to your dish, and it helps with the sugar intake. Some people recommend unsalted butter, but I always feel like it's a little too sweet if you do that. So make sure that you have that 1/3 cup of butter sitting out so it's nice and soft and mushy. Get your hands in there and rub that butter all over that rectangle. Now, on top of it, this is the key ingredient. This is why everybody loved my cinnamon buns and would come back for more. It's not a big secret, but a lot of people buy light brown sugar when they are buying their brown sugar. I never use light brown sugar. Dark brown sugar has more of the molasses in it. And so when you mix that up with your cinnamon, it adds a different punch to it that people really enjoy. So use about 1 cup of dark brown sugar and about 2½ tablespoons of ground cinnamon. Now I'm saying about because I do not measure this very well. I get a bowl and I throw in a bunch of dark brown sugar. I put in a lot of ground cinnamon, and I just kind of look at it and think, that looks good. I don't really measure that very much. So you mix that all up and you crumble that all over the top of the butter. Once you have that completely covered with your brown sugar cinnamon mixture, you're going to roll up the dough. This is your preference. You can either roll the long side and have a lot more rolls, or you can roll the short sides and just have thicker rolls. It's up to you. So roll up the cinnamon rolls, slice them at about 2 inches thick. Place the rolls that you have sliced in a lightly greased baking pan. You can use a circular baking pan for this or a 9 by 13 inch baking pan for this. It doesn't matter. But place them so they're touching each other. Not smashed, but touching each other. You're going to cover them and let it rise again until they're nearly doubled. That's about 30 minutes, usually in a warm location. Next, you're going to preheat your oven to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And once it's at the correct temperature, you're going to put your cinnamon rolls in. You're going to bake them till they're golden brown, about 15 minutes. Now, there are a couple different people when it comes to cinnamon rolls. Some really like that doughy, not baked all the way middle roll. Others like those end rolls, and so I usually keep them that way so that people can choose which one they like. I have friends that will only eat that center one that honestly, to me, does not seem like it's baked enough, but that's their preference and that's what they like. While they are baking, this is what makes it taste so good. Take 1 package of cream cheese softened, about 3 ounces. A 1/4 cup of butter, again, salted butter, make sure it's soft. Whip it and add 1½ cups of confectioner's sugar. A 1/2 teaspoon vanilla extract. Mix that all up till it's all nice and light and fluffy. And then you're going to pull those cinnamon rolls out of the oven and make sure you put that icing on as it's still hot, so it melts and it oozes and it drips in between all of the little spirals and down the edges. You will have a spectacular brunch cinnamon roll to serve your guests.
Okay, so this is the cava, which is the Spanish sparkling wine. And there's some peach brandy and a little bit of sugar and blackberries. Oh, and some seltzer.
It's good. It's a little dry.
Yeah.
But not too dry.
Yeah.
Like just right. It's very good. It would go really well with.
It's salty. Do you think it's a little salty-ish?
Maybe the seltzer.
Yeah, the seltzer.
Or salty.
I don't taste the peach as much as I thought I would.
And say it tastes better than it smells.
It's very pretty.
Yes.
It is. It's a gorgeous drink. Yeah.
The bubbles and
it's a pink color with the little bubbles and the berries. Yeah, very pretty.
I like it. I would drink it. It's a good special occasion.
Definitely. I could even see this on New Year's.
Yeah.
Instead of England's early Sunday dinner, a post-church ordeal of heavy meats and savory pies, why not a new meal served around noon that starts with tea or coffee, marmalade, and other breakfast fixtures before moving along to the heavier fare? By eliminating the need to get up early on Sunday, brunch would make life brighter for Saturday night carousers. It would promote human happiness in other ways as well. Brunch is cheerful, sociable, and inciting. It is talk compelling. It puts you in a good temper. It makes you satisfied with yourself and your fellow beings. It sweeps away the worries and cobwebs of the week.
As written by British author Guy Barringer in the 1895 Hunter's Weekly article, Brunch, a Plea. This is the first time that the word brunch, a blend of breakfast and lunch, appear in print. So it is believed that brunch was started for those wealthy aristocrats who were out partying all night, or perhaps coming back from the hunt from the previous day. When brunch came to the U.S. is somewhat still a bit of a mystery. If you check the internet, there are restaurants in New Orleans that say it started in the U.S. in 1884 in order to serve a hearty meal to the merchants and tradesmen who were working since dawn. However, Wikipedia says that Frank Ward O'Malley, who wrote for the New York newspaper The Sun, based brunch on the typical eating habits of a newspaper reporter. But then again, others say it didn't come to the U.S. until the 1930s in order to nurse hangovers of the varsity men who were partying the night before. Either way, in the 1940s and 50s, the restaurant industry picked it up as a good way to make money on days like Mother's Day and Easter. Today, brunch is becoming more and more popular with the younger crowd, and it's tied to the drinking culture. Not only are you able to nurse that hangover from the night before, but it's a good excuse to drink alcohol early in the morning the next day. It's also becoming increasingly more popular with families who don't often get to spend enough time sitting around a table like we once did, having a meal together.
So basically brunch is, that breakfast after partying.
Yeah.
Which is why they also add liquor to it or alcohol to it, because they say that if you have a hangover, it's supposed to help if you drink a... Do you have any idea?
Spiced up my brunch. There was a rule drink before noon.
No, not with brunch. Sunday on brunch,
Sunday.
you're okay to do it.
They say it's the easiest cure for a hangover. It's just the hair of the dog.
There you go.
Have another drink.
Make sure you visit us on letsdobrunch.com, our Facebook page, and Twitter. The next recipe I'm going to share with you. This recipe is for a peanut butter pie. Now, the key to this peanut butter pie is in the crust. The crust is made from chocolate wafer crumbs or Oreo cookie crumbs. Now, you can buy cookies and crush them all up. Of course, you want to take the icing out. Or you can buy box pieces of crumbs available at local restaurant supply stores, sometimes in your grocery store. You want to take 2 1/4 cups of those chocolate wafer crumbs, smash them up really good. Add 2 tablespoons of granulated white sugar. 1 stick of salted butter melted. You're going to mix that all up into a dough, and then you're going to spread it in your pan. You're going to put this in a pie pan, or I like to use a springform pan, so when I release it, it's all nice and smooth around the edges and it looks beautiful. You're going to put this in a preheated 350-degree oven. You're going to bake it for about 8 to 10 minutes, just until firm, and then you're going to remove it and place it on a wire rack to cool. Now, to make the peanut butter pie filling, in a bowl of an electric mixer or your hand mixer with a whisk attachment, whisk on high speed. You're going to put 8 ounces of cream cheese at room temperature, 1 cup creamy peanut butter, 2 teaspoons pure vanilla extract, and 1 cup of heavy whipping cream. Now you're going to whip that until it's a mousse consistency. Pour the filling over the cooled chocolate crust and smooth the top. You're going to cover it loosely and place it in the refrigerator for 3 to 4 hours or until firm. Now, when this comes out, I like to take a piece of wax paper, place it on top, and smooth it with your hand. That's going to make it completely smooth so that when you put the chocolate ganache on top, it's going to look beautiful. To make the chocolate ganache, you're going to take 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate, coarsely chopped, or 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips, a half cup of heavy whipping cream, 2 tablespoons salted butter cut in small pieces, and you're going to put it in a microwave-safe bowl. Make sure you only put it in the microwave for 15 to 30 seconds at a time, and then pull it out and stir it, and not to overheat it, or the chocolate will seize. When the ganache is completely melted, you're going to spread the ganache over the peanut butter, and then you're going to refrigerate for several more hours or overnight. When you're ready to serve it, if you've used a springform pan, after it's set, slide a sharp knife around the edges of the pan to separate the ganache from the edges, and then slowly open the springform pan. You're going to slice it, top it with some fresh whipped topping, and you have a beautiful, delicious peanut butter chocolate pie dessert for every occasion. To find out more information on some of these recipes, you can visit letsdobrunch.com. Visit us on our Facebook page or join us on Twitter. I spoke with Dan Silfies, an historical interpreter at a museum in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the Landis Valley Museum. He told me how families would have gathered together for the big meals that today we would consider brunch, back 100 and 200 years ago. He filled me in on some traditional recipes and how they would cook those recipes or bake those recipes in their hearth or bake ovens. He also shared with me some of the traditions of those times. So sit back and enjoy. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing great. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I am an interpreter at a local museum here in Lancaster County, and I do open hearth cooking, bake-oven baking, and I primarily focus on cooking about 200 years ago, so around 1800 to about 1840.
Now, what kind of things would they have served back then if they were having a big meal together?
Well, you would probably had your main meal being a ham or a turkey or a goose, something, very similar today, but your overall holiday celebrations weren't as big as they are today. So you would have had your main meal, but then you would have had your side dishes of your vegetables and your breads, maybe like a potato bread or a wheat bread, maybe a rye breads are very common used with the Pennsylvania Germans. Around Christmas time, you're starting to get into your annual butchering of some of your livestock herd to try and thin it out for the winter months. And not only does it thin it out so you don't have as many animals to feed, but you end up with some meat to feed the family. And one of those traditions would have been making stuffed pig stomach or hog maw.
Can you tell us how you make that?
One of the items you would take from the pig would be the stomach, and you'd clean it well. And you stuff it with some sausage, not like sausage, but just loose, like patty sausage style, and mix it with some diced potatoes and some parsley and salt and pepper. And you're going to cook that for about 2 hours in a Dutch oven on an open hearth fire. Today, you could do that in a stove for about 2 hours at 350, removing the lid for the last hour and turning the temperature up to about 400, 425 to make sure the top of the stomach gets brown.
So you also mentioned that there would be some sort of bird. Now, how would you cook that in a fireplace?
Well, if it's a small enough bird, you might be able to squeeze it into your Dutch oven. If it's a chicken, most of your chickens weren't as large as they are today. You fit in a Dutch oven, maybe even 2 abreast inside one, and keep some hot coals underneath and on top. But most of the people, if you're having a family get-together, it's not going to be as big as your family get-togethers today, but you'll still end up needing a bigger bird, so you'll probably use a turkey for that. In that case, it won't fit in the Dutch oven. You're going to have to hang it off a string from the fireplace.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about that?
It might actually be good for me to explain how your fireplace and your cooking area was set up for your guests to understand how you'd be able to use that. You see, we would be using an open hearth fire.
Okay.
And when I say open hearth, I mean the fireplace is large enough that you can actually walk inside it, but the hearth floor is level with the regular kitchen floor, and the fire's right down on the floor, back in the corner. Maximize the amount of space you can use to pour out hot coals or hang out kettles, to boil vegetables, or make a soup. But you also very commonly see what's known as a raised hearth, which is a hearth that is just raised off the floor by about 2 or 3 feet. That way it's not as hard on your back as you're cooking on it. But once again, you're still going to have to use the hot coals. And then what you can use to help hang your kettles and stuff is a metal crane, which is a long arm that comes out from the side of the fireplace. And when we are cooking that turkey, we can actually just use a string, truss up the turkey, season it, and hang it from the crane itself next to the fire, about 1.5 feet away, about 6 to 10 inches off the bottom of the hearth. And as long as you keep it spinning for several hours, that will slowly cook like a rotisserie. But it's going to take you about 5.5 hours for a turkey.
And what kind of vegetables would they be serving? Would it be exactly what we're thinking of today?
You would have some of the vegetables you think of today. You would have your carrots, your potatoes, maybe some onions in with the potatoes. You would end up with some green beans. Maybe you dried some beans earlier in the season. You could just reheat those as a type of baked bean. You could have some corn, but we're really getting into the point of the season where corn's that we're eating is already getting dried. So you could probably have like a cream corn or a corn custard, which is like a cream corn today.
Okay. Now, when you think of big meals with family today, and you did mention they make a lot of breads, but what about the pastries? Like when I think of a brunch, I think of, my waffles and my pancakes and my French toast. Did they have that kind of thing back then?
Yes, you can't think of the holidays without your cookies and your pies. Well,
Right.
Nobody would ever go away hungry from the meals, but everything was seasonal. The thing that we lose a lot with in our modern day, where you can go to supermarket and pick up apples year-round, pick up lemons year-round. Lemons themselves actually were a year-round item because they could be shipped up from the tropics. But we lose the seasonality of food and the natural cycle of our diet. And so that's why you'd end up having to start looking into your dried corns for the winter months. And after your fresh apples are gone, you're going to start seeing apple pie, but it's not known as apple pie, it's being known as schnitz pie or dried apple pie, where you basically soak your apple schnitz overnight to rehydrate them, and you use those dried apples for your pie. Of course, we had apple pie. We had pumpkin pies. There have been mincemeat pies, and one of the things, and it's a Lancaster County favorite, is your Shoofly Pie. And now, Shoofly Pie, there are two different schools of thought on this. Some people think that the wetter the bottom, the better, and some people prefer them to be a little bit more drier. And when they're wet, it's not meaning that it's doughy. It's just that the Shoofly Pie has a lot of molasses in it. The more molasses you cut into it, the wetter the bottom becomes. I personally like using a mild flavor molasses. I know a lot of people that like to use bootstrap or full flavor molasses, but I want to be able to get some of the, I want to be able to have a little bit more mild flavor. It goes great with the coffee. In fact, a lot of our modern taste would rather have the milder molasses and not the stronger molasses in flavor.
Right. Now, for those who have never had Shoofly Pie, can you describe it exactly, like what it is and what it looks like, consistency?
Well, when you make it, it actually is basically a liquid, almost like a custard pie it looks like when you're first filling it. But it's molasses and eggs and some flour and sugar, and it's all mixed together. And then you pour it into your pie shell. You put some of your flour, sugar, topping on top that has not been mixed into the egg and molasses. And as you cook it, the egg will start solidifying into almost a cake-like consistency, and then you end up crumb top on top. And as I said, you have more molasses, more of that molasses settles to the bottom below the egg. But some people will tell you one, some people will tell you the other. I like mine not quite as wet on the bottom. We also had your cookies, such as your sand tarts and your pfeffernusse.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about those cookies?
Oh, sure. Well, sand tarts are very similar to today's sugar cookies that you roll out and you use a cookie cutter to cut. And your pfeffernusse is more of a spice cookie. The closest thing I can relate that to today would be like a ginger snap, except it has a few more spices to it, like cardamom, ginger, cloves, cinnamon, and black pepper.
Oh, okay.
Which is where the name pfeffernusse, which translates from German to English as pepper nuts.
How would you actually make those cookies and those pies in the fireplace?
Well, the cookies are going to be a little difficult in the fireplace. The pies can be done in your Dutch oven. And now when I say Dutch oven, I'm not referring to your modern Dutch ovens that we all think of, which are your cast iron heavy pots that we can put in your oven at home. I'm talking more a more historically used Dutch oven that would have had legs underneath and a lip on top, where I could put hot coals underneath and on top of it. In fact, if viewers are interested, you actually could get Dutch ovens today by going, and what you'd want to do is you want to buy the camping Dutch ovens.
Okay, and how about those cookies?
Okay, well, when we're doing cookies, we're going to have to use our oven. Not the Dutch oven, but we have a large beehive or brick or bake oven. There's multiple terms for the same style oven. It would have been a large dome with thick walls and a brick interior. Now you're going to put your fire right on the inside of it. And in fact, anything you can bake in your oven at home today can be done in a bake oven. You just need to know how to use that bake oven. In fact, you can't just turn it on and after 10 minutes later, like your ovens today, you have to give it about 3.5 hours to preheat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's time consuming, but those 3.5 hours aren't spent just sitting around doing nothing. That's after we get the fire started on the brick, we're going to go and make our pie dough and make our pies. And we'll make our breads and let the bread dough rise. And we'll make our cookie dough and we'll get the cookie dough ready. And once the oven is up to temperature, usually you can tell by the flames they are no longer just lapping at the roof, but they kind of seem like they're just coming out of the air itself. It's almost looking into a furnace. And the bricks have changed from black to a white color. And it's time to pull the fire out. We'll mop out the inside, and then we don't have to wait till the temperature cools a little bit, because usually you end up overheating it initially.
Okay. And how can you tell what the temperature is?
Well, the method that I usually use is I stick my arm in, and I count to 10, and I try to feel that temperature. And what we're aiming for is about 10 seconds to leave our arm in there before we're forced to pull it out. And that puts us to about 450 degrees, so it's right about the time we want to get our breads into the oven. They need the most heat to get a nice crust to them. And shortly after that, we'll be able to get our fruit pies, so your apple pie, into it. And then maybe about, depending on how quickly that's cooling down, and when it's a little bit cooler, then we can finally get our custard pies in, like our pumpkin pie or our egg custard.
What is an egg custard?
An egg custard is a pie that has primarily eggs and milk and a little bit of flour and sugar, of course. And that's poured into the pie shell. And then you could either season it with some ground nutmeg, or I personally like going out to my garden and hand-picking some of the wild mint that I have outside and putting into it. So another thing that would have been great for your breakfast would have been the sticky buns, which are a cinnamon bun that is cooked with a molasses and brown sugar and butter syrup on the bottom of the pan. You put the buns on top, and then after you're done baking it, you flip the whole thing out, and all that molasses and brown sugar and butter oozes down over the top of them as a sticky glaze. I personally like mine with pecans on them or walnuts. Some people prefer them with just the glaze on top. But you can do it without the glaze if you'd rather have something that's not quite as heavy. But you really do miss something without that on it.
And that's something that they would have served 200 years ago.
Oh, yes. And I've done that on the open hearth before.
Now, how do you do that? In, like, a Dutch oven?
Yeah, I could do it in a Dutch oven. I can do it in the bake oven. But a Dutch oven, it will take me about 45 minutes with some coals on top and bottom. Because of the sugar in it, I actually end up putting it in a separate pan, and I put a trivet between that pan and the bottom of the Dutch oven to keep that sugar from burning. Because nobody likes to taste the burnt sugar. But it is a yeast-risen dough, so
okay.
You you need to let it rise about an hour to an hour and a half before you can go ahead and roll it out and make your cinnamon rolls. Now, if any of your listeners have not made cinnamon rolls or jelly rolls before, basically what you need to do is you need to roll out your dough in a rectangle, not the size of a cookie sheet.
Okay.
And I usually try to go about 3/8 of an inch thick. Then I put my melted butter on top and some cinnamon sugar mix. Then I roll it up, and then slice it. And when I flip them over on the side, you can see the spiral that the dough has created. And as it cooks, they'll rise up.
And you said how long would it take?
Well, because you have to let the dough rise between an hour and two, it's going to, I would give yourself about 3 hours if you want to make sure you get some decent sticky buns, because they'll take about 30 or 40 minutes in a Dutch oven. In your oven at home, however, you're looking about 325 degrees for about 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay, sounds delicious. What else would they have served with that? Now, did they have coffee back then? Like nowadays, when I think of a cinnamon bun, I think of a coffee in my hand. Is coffee a big thing 200 years ago?
It is a big thing. There's a lot of coffee houses that would have been around that would have been doing their own roasting of their own coffee beans. What most people don't realize is that a green coffee bean does not actually go bad. It will stay relatively fresh until you start roasting it. And most people think that roasting a coffee bean is going to be a wonderful smell. Well, yes and no. You see, when you first do it, when the bean is more green, it's going to come across more like you're burning grass.
Oh, okay.
And it actually will get to a point where it will pop. And once it starts getting brown and dark brown and it makes that pop, that's when it's roasted. And that's when you start getting that familiar aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans. And then you can grind them up in your own coffee grinder and serve it. And a lot of your coffee houses and some of your taverns will have been doing that on their own.
Okay, where would they get the coffee?
Before the Revolutionary War, and actually even into the early days of America, it wasn't New York that was the largest city here in the young United States. It was actually Philadelphia. We had the largest seaport. And Lancaster County is only a 5-day trip by Custard wagon away. So we had a very direct route to the seaport, enough so that we were able to end up having items like your coffee beans. We were able to get tea. One thing that really surprises a lot of people at a common tavern fare was your fried oysters. And that was a common tavern fare. Well, most people have had that pie in the evening, but today I don't see why anybody around, late afternoon, late morning wouldn't mind having some fried oysters to go along with their small little meal.
Right. Okay, breads. Now, you mentioned breads. Now, did they have yeast back then? I mean, how did they get their breads to rise?
Oh, yes, they did have yeast. In fact, if you wanted to have something rise 200 years ago, you had really two methods to do it. Use a lot of egg whites and whip them up to a meringue and fold them in, as you would use on some of your cakes. But the other option, which most of us are familiar for rising items, would be yeast. But they weren't going to the store to buy their yeast. They were actually capturing their yeast wild from the air. The spores floating around in the air, and most of us go about our everyday lives without realizing that they're there. But if you've ever made mashed potatoes and you've let that water sit out for a day or two, you'll see that that's going to start boiling. Well, not boiling, but bubbling. And that bubble is telling you that there's yeast that's been falling into that pot, and you can use that yeast to add to your bread. Now, the problem with that is it could end up starting to sour. If you want a sourdough, that's great. But most people don't want a sourdough. So what you're going to do is you can use hops. It would probably surprise most people to know that most family gardens would have had some hops growing in them. And it's not because everybody's going and making beer to have a good old time on the weekends, but it was so that you can use those hops, pick the buds of a hop and throw it into some water, usually a couple of large handfuls with about 3 or 4 pints of water. You're going to boil that down, strain off the hops, and use that hop tea, as you will, into some flour, and you're going to mix the two until it gets thick like pancake batter. And leave it sit out for a few days, and you'll start noticing it to bubble. The hops actually will act as a preserving agent to keep it from souring. One reason why they're used in beer. But as far as holiday meals go, in my opinion, one of the most important ones is going to be the first meal of the year. On New Year's Day, it's very traditional. Even today, a lot of your Pennsylvania families will get together, and they'll have pork and sauerkraut for the first meal of the year. And that's because pork and sauerkraut is seen as being a meal of good luck. And the reason for that is because the pig, for its fruits, always looks forward. So you want to be able to look forward for the year, not try and look back on the past. Some people tell you can take some of those dried apple slices and put them in with your sauerkraut if you want to sweeten it up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I personally like having my sauerkraut being a little bit more on the sour, a little bit more on the tart side, so I don't usually put apple slices in mine. But if you're not a tart person, putting in some sweet apple slices will definitely sweeten that up for you a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have mashed potatoes to serve with that, because there's nothing better than taking those mashed potatoes and mixing it with the sauerkraut in with them, at least in my opinion.
So thank you very much for talking to me today, Dan, about all of this. It's very interesting. Maybe we'll try to make something from 200 years ago for Thanksgiving or Christmas this year.
Oh, I would definitely suggest that. Some of the items are going to probably be more well received for your family than others. Like, I would probably suggest not trying to unload a pig stomach on all your family without them knowing it. But a nicely roasted turkey or some shoofly pie would be a wonderful touch to your Christmas meal.
For more information on Landis Valley Museum, please visit landisvalleymuseum.org or visit us at loveyourbrunch.net. Jamie shared with me one of her traditions, and maybe you can make it part of your tradition as well.
Most of my family lives 4 hours northwest of us, so we get together for something called Thanksmas, which is a combination of Thanksgiving and Christmas at the same time. So we have Thanksgiving on Thursday, then on Friday we have Thanksmas, which is sort of in place of our Christmas celebration. And so it's a weekend-long festivities with the family. And we usually end up doing some sort of brunch with that because it's an easy way just for everyone to have breakfast and lunch together.
Do you guys have a special recipe that you use every single time?
Yes, we have. There's a French toast, like an overnight French toast that you make, and you put hard bread. You cut up Italian bread, and you put it in the bottom of a casserole dish, and then you mix your, I think it's eggs and milk and actually pecans, and you put that on top. And while that's baking the next day, you let that soak overnight, and then the next day, when you bake, after you bake it, while you're baking it, you make a caramel sauce with pecans, and you throw that on top.
Yummy.
A favorite.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening this week to Love You a Brunch. Join us next time when we get to hear from some of you about some of your traditions from all over the country. We'll talk to someone about what wines to pair with what brunch dishes, and we'll speak to another one of Open Table's Top 100 Brunch Restaurants, Deerfield Restaurant in Newark, Delaware, plus much, much more. Love You a Brunch is brought to you by AZIC Incorporated. Visit us at loveyourbrunch.net, on our Facebook page, Twitter, and Skype at Love You a Brunch Podcast. Thanks so much. Meet you next time at Love You a Brunch.